welcome to episode 1 of Into the Valley. Two brothers, been supporting Charlton whole life, and we thought, do you know what, we talk about Charlton enough between us, so we'd bring it to the internet and discuss over everything. So first of all, I think today wanted to kind of discuss over our day. We went to Wembley, what a day that was, and really just kind of talking through on that. Then from there, wanted to discuss through and look at kind of the transfer business we've done this summer, and what we feel kind of going into next season. So first of all, I think probably looking into that day at Wembley, I think something that not many Charlton fans when we came to November, December last year thought was going to come. But I think the way we kind of put that run of form and got to that day, and a really quite incredible day. What it was.
Yeah, I mean, that whole day was just one of those days. I went to the previous final. I know you can make it to the last one. But that day was a bit different. Playing Sunderland, I think they are one of those sides that you are the underdog in that one. They're a massive side. This time around was really different. I think playing Leyton Orient, we were definitely the favourites, I would say. So that expectation on the day was sort of put a bit more of an edge on things, I think.
I think there was also a big side to, I think, the day whereas before, I think we were the underdogs. I think this time, especially with the new ownership model, we went into the last time with the run of form going in as underdogs. And I think there was always still a question over, even with promotion, where it would kind of take us. Whereas I think this time round, I think a lot of us felt that this is really the kickstart to moving things on. And honestly, I think it was probably earlier than what the ownership probably thought. I'm not even sure, kind of squad-wise, I think we were building probably for this push next season.
Yeah.
And I think the fact we got it this season, and I also think the character in which it was shown, I think from just going to the playoff semi-finals and watching and just seeing that it was just everything Nathan Jones is about. I think it was just that
it all clicked together. The way he sort of put his side together throughout the whole season, he was really trying to create that sort of defensive solidity at the back that we did not have the season before.
But the amazing thing is, I don't think it was. I think it was just building blocks on what we had the season before. I think we had a lot of when Nathan Jones took over, we had a lot of draws. That realistically this season the big difference was we turned those draws into 1-0 wins, 2-1 wins, and it was just those small margins of tightening up the defence. And I think that's probably the biggest thing we could take from the end of last season was how solid the defence had come, and maybe just taking a few more of our chances as well and being very clinical when we had to be.
Yeah, I think he's always said it, Jones, but the stressing of keeping clean sheets, you build from that. And then that's what we did. Obviously, going through to a playoff final is always a slight lottery. And obviously, the nerves are jangling. You're in the stadium. We were both obviously there. Those sort of days, you're just hoping your team can get that first goal. And then once we got that goal, I think it was always going to be Charlton's day.
I think that was something the whole of last season, really. And you do wonder, even just psychologically, when you look at what we did at Orient in the league, those last kind of 2-minute goals that we got and kind of winning 2-1 right at the last minute, and how kind of psychologically that kind of summed up for me. I think both the playoff final and that game both summed up Charlton amazingly well of what we did last season, which was ruthlessly efficient. When we did get leads, we held on to them. When we got to the end of games, we never gave up. It was always, even in the 90th minute, which for Charlton normally was the other way around.
Yeah,
most seasons it was
been on the end of some real horror shows. We were almost, as Charlton fans, I know most fans will say the same thing, but we're always waiting for that last sucker punch to go in, really ruin our day.
Yeah.
That day was something special, and I think the air around the stadium, all the fans, I think you'd agree, like when we were out in the pubs and stuff, it just felt something was definitely there. It was there for the taking.
Well, I think it was seen when you went towards the end of the season, just seeing the attendances keep kind of moving up. And I think for the first time in a long time, there was the momentum, there was the confidence. I think having both kind of confidence in the people who are running the club, I think getting the confidence in Nathan Jones, which realistically all season wasn't there the whole time. There was a lot of people, not proud to say myself as well, that were kind of in that camp of, is Nathan Jones the right guy? And I think realistically he's managed to galvanise the club and do something that realistically, so when we have had success in the past is when people do. I think you look at Bowyer, you look at Chris Powell, it was always people who had an involvement in the club and really, I think, galvanise the fans together and bring the club together, that really highlighted what last season was about.
I feel like we've had sort of managers come in that have tried to do it. I think you had like your Cole Robinsons, you had even Ben Garner and people like that were really trying to get the fans on side. But I think people were bought into Jones's sort of mentality. He's passionate about the club. He's been there before. And now having him there to bring us into the Championship, he's got experience. He's a really solid manager. And I think the signings, which we'll go on to in a minute, have really bolstered us. And I think I am optimistic about the Championship. I don't know about you. I feel like we're building something at the club. Like you said, attendances are getting bigger. And there's definitely a really good sort of feel-good factor around the club, which I think could really bode us well for the new season. But let's see what happens. It's always a roller coaster, isn't it?
It always is with Charlton, yeah. So I think that's probably quite a good segue into saying that, look, realistically, I think when we did get promotion, I think most Charlton fans' initial reaction was probably looking at the Championship this year. I think it's a extremely strong division across the board. I think there's been years where there's maybe stronger teams at the top, but I think overall 1 to 24 is probably one of the strongest Championship seasons for a long time. And I think when we look at our squad, I think we had starting 11, maybe one that could scrape into Championship side, but I think squad-wise, depth especially last season I think was an issue, especially when you looked out on kind of the wide play. And I think behind most positions there was a bit of concern that if we had Tyrese Campbell injured, if we had, for example, last season Godden got injured or Luke Berry got injured, there wasn't a direct necessary replacement. I think we were kind of scrambling if that was the case.
I think we were sort of relying more on youth style players or players that have only just come to the club. You got Dixon, who was probably, he's got potential. He looks like a really exciting player for the future. But I think the long term plan for him is to maybe loan him out, get him some experience playing at a sort of English level. Because obviously coming from Jamaica, it's pretty raw out there. Like it's, you can see he's got glimpses of something that could be really good. Not sure how much game time he'll get this year, but like you said, it was also up front. We had really had some sort of players that were on the fringes, Kanu and players like that again, who sort of look like they.
Well, and I think the realistic side when it comes to League One, I think you can kind of get away with playing some of those youth players, bringing them in, whereas I think the Championship's maybe a bit more ruthless. I'm not sure you can get away with covering positions as much with those youth players coming in and those inexperienced players. And I think they're ones that probably when we're looking at it do need to now go out on loan. I think there's quite a few of the players that we've maybe relied on, and personally I think people like Dan Kanu I think needs to go out. I equally think personally, and I know he's one that maybe divides quite a few Charlton fans, but I think Roy Anderson could do with potentially a year out on loan where he gets that kind of consistent first team experience. Because I think with him, once again, I think there's a youth player who Charlton have historically relied so heavily and chucked them so far in the deep end that maybe they do need that first year of being at the right level to kind of develop.
I think Anderson's an interesting one because he's I think he's like early 20s now, isn't he? Pretty sure. And he will be one that, because of the style of play, he's quite sort of dogged. He's quite sort of runs hard, tries to win the ball back, and actually that could be quite useful. Bringing him on, he's definitely, I don't think he won't be a starter. He wasn't really much of a starter last season, but he will be a player that potentially might keep holding in the sort of bench or in rotation, so he can maybe come on and
he does
play up in some games because that's what he's very good at. He does work bloody hard when he
I think he suits the Nathan Jones kind of high press, and it's not necessarily about being the most technically gifted players. And I think that's what Nathan Jones has always done very well, which is getting the most out of players who maybe he does get them to levels above where they should be.
Definitely. I've done it with quite a few.
Yeah,
to be fair.
Yeah.
What might be quite useful now is if we run through our transfers, maybe that we've gone through so far. So obviously we've signed a fair chunk of players already, actually, which is again quite rare for Charlton. I know that Jones is keen on getting his business done quite early in the window. He's tended to try and get him in before the season starts so he can really work with him. But I don't know if you want to reel off the first couple.
Well, I think where we started really was with Sonny Carey coming in, free transfer from Blackpool. I think really exciting player, really something that we maybe need in regards to can kind of maybe create that goal out of nothing. I think when you look at what he's kind of produced, and I think with the Blackpool squad that you saw last year, realistically, you could look at the first half of the season where statistically not much went in, and that kind of comes into a later transfer of Rob Apter as well. But the second half of the season, that once they started clicking, kind of stats really started to come in, and you saw kind of goal contributions, assists. And I think with Sonny Carey, it's something that I was quite critical of maybe the Charlton midfield last year, which is I think that kind of creativity. We had a very dogged kind of centre mids last year, with Luke Berry really being the only one who had that kind of creative spark, albeit I even think with him there was maybe need for that creativity, but a bit more physical on top of that in that kind of where he's playing in the kind of cam roles. So I think Sonny Carey was a really, really good signing, and
if he gives us something that we don't automatically have already. Like you said, he has a pop from range. He's one of those players that will create maybe a goal scoring opportunity from something that's not, like you said, we've been quite functional last season. And like Luke Berry as well, he scored a few long ranges, but he again is not exactly the sort of player that's necessarily going to take his man on and smash a goal in every game.
And the realistic side, I think, when you look at Luke Berry, age-wise as well, he's not someone who you're going to depend on for a whole season. I think actually maybe him coming into more of a role which is squad rotation, coming into certain games where he'll suit, but not relying on him. And I think last year in that role, we didn't have huge amount of choice. And I think that was going into the Championship, something I think 100% was something that we weren't able to we had to get those roles sorted. Obviously on a similar vein, obviously before that we had Thierry Small, leaving the club as well. So I think that left quite a gap. I thought it was an interesting one with Small, because I personally feel it's going to be a big miss, because he was that creative out of nothing spark. But I also do think he was very raw, very young, and I think we saw glimpses. But when you went into the tail end of the season, I think there was arguments to say he had his best form maybe a bit earlier, and as it came to the end of it, he still created stuff out of nothing and was always a danger, and I think that created space for other players. But realistically, he did go missing in games.
I think with him, I found last season very exciting player to watch, very skillful, but he was very raw. Like you say, raw is the word I would use, and his end product wasn't always great. He'd cut in and sort of have a dig, and a lot of the time it was quite wild. So I think he's still one that he's still young, early 20s again, and I think he will be one that will be much better in a few years' time. I think his move to Preston was probably financial, to be fair, and they probably offered him a big wage, which I saw online. He definitely was offered a lot of money, or a lot more than we were offering him. Which again, for a young player, it's hard to turn that down. So you can kind of understand it.
And I think when you looked at what that deal was, I think a lot of Charlton fans initially would have looked at it and thought it was a shame that we couldn't retain, and maybe he could build with us going into the Championship. I think my biggest view when I looked at it was it's an area we have to replace.
Yeah, well,
I think what we have had in the Charlton squads, especially maybe last season, was I think a bit of a reliance on him when those games are tough, and when those games are really kind of you're 0-0 going into the 70th minute. He's the kind of guy who will create something out of nothing and break down a team, and I think that's something we definitely have to, as a club, maybe introduce more.
I think that's what the reaction was generally from the fan base, I would say, from what I read anyway online. Like, people were disappointed that he didn't re-sign. A lot of people were anyway, some didn't care so much. But I think the big thing was that he's replaced, that we still have that sort of attacking threat down the wing sides, because the wing sides, whether it's be wing back or wingers, are somewhere that we need to definitely sort of push on from now, get some better players in there and move forward. That's what we knew. Jones would be looking at players to sort of bring someone else in. So
no, definitely. And I think from there we go into the next signing, which I think maybe from my side is a very important signing is Thomas Kaminski.
Yeah,
And I think that's a really, really good signing. I think we had, in all honesty, Mannion towards the end of last season, I thought was very solid. And actually, I mean, there was that whole battle between Maynard Brewer and Mannion. And I think for me, Mannion really stepped in and took reins over that towards the end of the season. And very difficult for me to say he did anything wrong.
Yeah.
But I think it is probably a position that, look, we know over the years Charlton have had a merry-go-round of goalkeepers.
Yeah,
And I think with
yeah,
Kaminski, what we've got is someone who I, for the first time in a while, could see as being, I think, one, the fact we paid a decent transfer fee for. And I think because of that, I think you're going to see is someone that we plan on being the number one for not just a season like we have historically, but someone who will come in with, I mean, Premier League experience, champion experience with Luton in last year, which I think whenever you look at any Luton players last year, you have to take the caveat to, I think everyone was awful. And I think you look at it, but I also think with that, he had a lot of practice last year.
Yeah.
And I think with it, I think that's a very, very astute signing. And I think one that gives us a solidity at the goalkeeper position that we haven't.
100%. Obviously, a lot of the reaction, even from people outside of the Charlton sort of fan base, is that is a solid signing. That is a goalkeeper with experience. He's had games with Blackburn as well, and I know the Blackburn fans rated him quite highly. Obviously, got his move to Luton, and yeah, he's a keeper that could definitely be in the sticks for a while. Solid keeper, it's something we need. And I feel bad for Mannion because he has, like you say, he didn't really do anything wrong last season. And he was quite commanding in the box. One thing I liked about him, he would come out and claim things, and you felt that he was quite a safe pair of hands. But from what I've seen, I think you would say Kaminski's a step up, and he's definitely a better shot stopper. At that level, we're going to need someone that can keep the ball out of the net. So.
And I think the realistic side is he is going to be busy. And I think having that confidence behind the back line, I mean, the way Nathan Jones is going to set up a side anyway, it's going to be a very organised squad.
Yeah.
But the realistic side is we are in the Championship. Teams are going to break us down. I think having that confidence in your goalkeeper is a massive thing at this stage.
We need it, especially with players that haven't played in the Championship. They're going to need players around them that are going to sort of instill some confidence.
Yeah.
Good signing that one.
Definitely. And I think probably going on from there, so we kind of went into then a signing of a few different kind of players, and I think this is where we saw, I think, probably the surprising side. And I think Kaminski started it with signing him the undisclosed fee, I think, thought to be in the region around £1 million. We then went into kind of the signing of Amari Bell on a free transfer.
Yeah.
Reece Burke as well, who rumoured, I think, to be around kind of the 800,000 to £1 million mark.
Yeah.
I think those two, I mean, I think a lot of fans online who look at Charlton and call us kind of Luton FC.
Luton Martin.
Yeah.
Well, Amari Bell ticks both the boxes, Jamaican and Luton.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. So, but I think with both of those, I think what you bring in is Premier League experience in regards to them having played there. I think just the experience you gain, whether they were at that level or not. I think Amari Bell especially had a pretty decent spell in the Prem. I think he was, as I say, not the absolute best player because realistically they did go down, but
they played well in the Prem though.
Yeah,
and I think at the time Rob Edwards had them playing a good style of football. They were unlucky really to go down. And I think having players that have played at that high level, the Premier League level, but also solidly in the Championship, it's going to again be just players in the squad that's definitely going to be worthwhile having. From what I've read about Bell as well, he's sort of pre-season, he's looked really solid, athletic. I know he gave a pen away the other day, but I think he's going to be another one that's going to just bolster the defence, give us a bit more strength for the back, and like you say, he's probably got a lot more experience at that level. So on the ball, he's going to probably be more confident and that sort of thing. Which I hope these signings that Jones has definitely had one eye on, sort of some experience along with some sort of rawer talent, maybe from lower division. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, and I also think with Amari Bell, I think he brings the versatility of being able to cover that left back position as well. I think that's quite an important one that we have, and I think it's something we've shown in other signings being able to cover other positions if needed without it being. I mean, I think Amari Bell probably at his age now has lost that yard of pace that left back would be a covering role
I
rather
think he's
than
been brought in as a more central defender.
yeah. But I think that
he's
the fact he can play out there and he can cover it, I think is quite important.
Yeah.
And I think with Reece Burke as well, I think we've got from what most Luton fans are saying, we've got an incredibly talented centre back who, if you can keep him fit,
I think that's the thing we were probably is the biggest thing with him is keeping him fit.
and I don't think Charlton's probably the right place to go if you want to say.
First thing you say that.
Yeah.
A few years ago, we were awful with our injuries. I think last season was probably one of the best seasons for not getting players injured, actually, which is a positive. So obviously they're doing something right. So.
Well, and look, I think in that centre back position, hopefully we've got enough cover that I think even when you look at last year, I think we had a lot of dependence on Jones, for example, who was quite clearly towards the end of the season playing for injury. And the hope is that maybe this year, in those moments, we could bring a Reece Burke. It's not bringing in someone who we know is going to be quite a step down. If you can bring in someone who is at the same kind of, similar kind of level, I think that's a big thing. And I think that's something we have really pushed on this year. Is squad depth.
Yeah, well, also, you usually use the last sort of friendly game of the pre-season as a barometer of sort of the teams that will start that first game, and so I noticed Gillespie didn't even start, so that shows the sort of depth that we're able to sort of rotate those sort of players now, and that back line is going to be sort of backed up with some decent quality if someone is to get injured, so you can't complain about that.
No, I think it's a really, really important one. So I think probably going on from there was Tanter Laf. I think an interesting signing for me. I think he brings everything that Nathan Jones wants regards to works hard. He's a physical presence. I would look at him as a replacement as well, which I think from last year, very sad to see. Obviously, I think right time, but Chuck's to head on from the club. And I think for most people, pretty kind of cult hero and gave his all to the club. But realistically, injuries just were never going to he was never going to be, I think, past this year. It was always going to be his last year. And I think he kind of brings a younger, more athletic version of that. I think the only maybe question marks come on his side is maybe the end product, the finishing, etc. I think from what I've seen, I think that is something he's got to work on to maybe take that convincing step up. But I'm not completely convinced myself that's why he's been signed. I think
he's got that burst of pace. I think he's strong. He looks, from what I've seen, that he's good on the ball, that he can hold the ball up, that he can sort of, bring other players into the game. So he'll have elements of goal. Well, of course, every striker is going to need to score goals. But I think that they'll be looking at him to bring other players into the game, to really rough up some defenders, give defenders a difficult game. And that is always a really useful tool to have. That's what Chucks used to do when he came on. He would bully people. He'd, make life really difficult and just create that chance that maybe we didn't have when we had sort of, your Goddens and smaller players on the pitch at the time. So, he'll definitely bring something good to the squad. And I know for a fact Stockport fans rate him highly. They loved him as well.
And I think
a top bloke as well.
And I think one of the things that maybe we've signed, and I see, is a lot of players that the fans of the other clubs have said they're brilliant characters, they're loved by the club. And I think that's something that is very important for Nathan Jones, but I also think for Charlton fans, because the realistic side, we've had and signed good players in the past. But I think that connection with the fans is what makes maybe Charlton quite special as a club, and I think that is important.
We've had players that we've signed that we thought at the time were going to be big time players for us, and their attitude sort of let them down. And I think that's like you said, that's where Jones actually comes in. He said, right, I need people in here that want to be here, that are going to be, have the right mentality, and that's definitely a sort of one of the things that he looks for in a player when he signs them. So,
well, and I think that's my most exciting with Tanta. I think it is the fact that Nathan Jones has such an incredible history as well of turning players around. I mean, I look at Gillespie as probably the prime example. I think most Charlton fans would have said that he was first on the team sheet probably to be getting out, and realistically, a lot of fans didn't really want him at the club anymore. And I think I think what Jones has kind of done for certain players such as him, and I think there's other examples as well,
what the best out of
is I think he gets the best out of them and provides them a system where they can kind of flourish. And I think with Tanta, I think there is a very good chance that he could bring up those parts of the game, give him that confidence and get him in the right system that maybe he would surprise us, and with end product, I get the feeling he would be a pretty
Yeah, no,
pretty amazing player.
He's going to be an exciting player to watch. I think he's young, he's strong, he's got a good skill set. So I think a good one to watch.
No, definitely. So I think that's going to be it for kind of part one of this one. And then what we're going to do, we'll come back in a sec. We're going to be covering over the rest of the transfers from this year, and then looking ahead to the kind of what our predictions are for next year, where we think we'll kind of sit within the table. All right, so welcome back to part two, where we'll carry on with the kind of rest of the transfer activity, and then we'll start looking on to the upcoming season. So I think a good place to start next was the signing of Joe Rankin-Costello.
Yep. I thought that was an interesting one. Again, that's another player he's played over 100 games for Blackburn, so he's one that's got experience. He also, again, I don't know a huge amount about him, but from what I read from Blackburn fans, they say he's a sort of hard tackling, really puts his foot in there. The highlight reel from him is him just sliding in and going in for people, which they're the sort of players you need in that sort of squad. As well, we talked about how Jones plays. We need players that are going to really put everything into it. He looks a cool signing, and he probably will end up being a fan favourite because those sort of players always go down really well. We used to have sort of Kishashevs, your sort of hard tackling midfielders that really put everything into it. So yeah, I was really pleased with that signing, to be fair. I don't know what your thoughts were.
Well, my view on it, I thought it was a brilliant signing. I think he once again brings massive versatility, where I think for Blackburn, if he's been needed in a position, has kind of played there. I think really kind of in high regard by the Blackburn fans themselves. I think they really liked him. I think a lot of the time maybe felt he didn't quite get the opportunities in the squads, and I think that was a big thing behind it. So, yeah, I think, look, a really, really good signing for the squad. Do I think he's going to be the absolute statement signing where we're looking week in, week out going, oh, statistically, this is what he's done? Probably not, but I look at him in a similar vein to what I think last season of Connor Coventry. I think he'll go under the radar, and I think he gives cover in a lot of positions where realistically we do need cover, and I think he'll be... I think one of those signings we could look back on and maybe underestimate how important it is.
He'll be one of those that'll be a real cog, sort of one of those players that actually keeps everything running round. Like you say, Coventry was that man last season, and it's good that we've got him as sort of either a backup or even as part of that solid midfield that's going to really like.
But also forwards. Really, really good championship experience again. And I think that's where we've brought in a nice blend of, I think, throughout the whole transfer window, and we'll go on to some more in a sec because I think they probably highlight it more, of very kind of exciting top end League One talent. And then we've mixed it in with a really nice blend of championship experience, and they're the kind of players who will help those players develop and really push on. So yeah, I think a really, really smart signing, and I think one that will fit in really well.
Jones will be very pleased that he got him across the line because I'd say that he's going to fit in there well. So.
Yeah, no, I think definitely. So going on to next, we're going to Rob Apter. So I think really, really exciting signing, this one. I think when you look at what he was doing for Blackpool last season, realistically similar to Sonny Carey, I think it was the second half of the season that really started getting the stats in. I think one of the things I thought when we signed him was that is the exciting replacement of Thierry Small, and very maybe different players in some regards, but I think one of the things when I looked at Steve Bruce on an interview after they lost him, and he said he is one of the kind of dying breeds of a player who will just take on his man, and I think similar to Thierry Small, he has maybe a bit more to kind of fine tune, but I think at the age he's at, he's got that time, and I think it will not be necessarily, I think he'll bring some exciting times, but I think it's one that could be for the next 2 or 3 years, you could really see him develop into a real talent. And if he is a kind of player who can take on a man, tighten up kind of the finishing and getting into better positions and getting crosses in the box, he's someone who could, in my opinion, with a lot of the players we've signed on decent contracts, could be one who we end up selling in a few years' time because he's outgrown us, and I think that's a really exciting place to be in when we're signing players like that.
I think it's the sort of player that Charlton have been screaming out for a little while. Those sort of players that get you off your seat. He's always, from the highlights again that I've watched of him, he's running at players like Bruce. You said, like, obviously Steve Bruce is a really experienced manager and player, and if he's saying that he's sort of one of those players that really excites you, then you got to look at that and think, yeah, he's going to be a good player for us. Again, it's that sort of position that we needed, and actually at Championship level, we're going to need players that are going to run at defenders and sort of get the pressure away from the back four, because obviously we're going to be under the cosh in some of those games where we're playing the teams that are definitely at the top of the table. We need that outlet to be able to get them down the pitch, and create chances as well, which let's hope he can do that.
Well, I think once again it creates that kind of depth in. I think last season we were so heavily reliant on Tyrese Campbell, and we were so heavily reliant on Thierry Small. And when they weren't having good games, we had a very rigid team that wasn't going to concede. But I think those exciting moments, and I think bringing in players like those and some of the ones we're going to talk going forward as well, I think one thing we massively needed to add to that squad was goals and threats. And I think he really fits that. And as I say, I think he's not the finished article. I think it is going to maybe be a season of learning, especially kind of first year going up into the Championship. And we've got a few players like that, but I think they'll, under Jones, learn very well and give us what we need, and create that depth. And I think that probably goes into the next one really well, which I think was really the probably flagship signing so far, Charlie Kelman.
Yeah, that was one that surprised me, actually. I kept seeing stuff online about him maybe going over to America. Obviously, he's got his links with America. And when I saw that we were in for him, I did think, that is, again, like you said, one of those statement sort of signings where you're getting in someone that's proven goal scorer. Yes, he's scored a lot of goals at League One level, but the way, again, that he plays that high line, getting in behind the defenders quick, he can finish. Clearly, he can finish. It's just whether he can do that at Championship level, which I'm hopeful with right players around him, people putting him in through. There's no reason why he can't.
And I think if you were to look at it, and from what I've seen, I think some of the concern may be that he has had limited opportunities at QPR and it hasn't quite worked. And then realistically, last season being his first season of goal scoring that he hadn't had previously, I think when I look at that, I think being in the right system and playing under the right manager, and I think there was clearly something at QPR where over time, I think the kind of relationship had broken down. I think there's quite clear signs of that in quite a few different ways. But I also think he, like a lot of players, it takes you to have that breakthrough season to then really kick on. And I think with him, once again, I think there's an exciting player. Do I think he's the finished article? No. Do I think there might be a bit of adapting to the Championship? Yes. But I think there is the potential there to be a really, really clinical finisher, a goal scorer. And I think my final point to that is, if you're a goal scorer in the Championship, realistically working under Matty Godden as well, who will be able to teach and give him that experience. I think, because to me, he shows a lot of signs of being what Godden was as a younger player.
I think he's already come out and said that he quite admires the way Godden plays. He's a very sort of similar style of striker. I think he's quite a poacher. It might be a sniffer dog mark too. But yeah, no, I mean, he is that sort of player that will get those little goals that we need, especially when it comes to that Championship level of football. We're going to need every chance that we get to hit the back of the net. So if he can convert those little half chances into goals, and even just those little tap-ins, the ones that, they're not the most exciting, but they will get us some pretty tough results.
And realistically, they're what got us promoted with Godden last year. And I think what it starts to add as well is the thing that I keep coming back to, which is depth. And I think something last season when Godden, at the end of it, when Godden maybe couldn't play or was injured or whatever, realistically we had a gap there, and Anike didn't look like the same player. Hadmay, he's done what he's done and realistically didn't quite live up to what we thought he might be. And I think now starting to add in kind of depth where we know, as I say, it will be, for me, a very successful signing. And I think it's...
Yeah, I definitely... I think he will definitely slot in well, and we play that high press, and we still will in the Championship. He will be great for that. He will be pushing that back line back up the pitch. Yeah, it's only going to be a good thing for us, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. Definitely agree.
Yeah.
And then we come to our final signing of the season, which was probably the most crazy signing in regards to the roller coaster. So you had pretty much over the whole summer, from what I saw, he was definitely going to Portsmouth. That was all kind of so heavily linked. And from my side, I went on to Twitter X one day and saw that we were linked with him, and that seemed to be going at 100 mile an hour. And then went very slow. And then we had Noel Hunt coming out in his interview saying that the player was devastated, he wasn't going to be going, all of this. And then we got the kind of
Friday night.
Friday night, the announcement coming, and seeing that we'd signed him. Once again, undisclosed fee, but decent kind of contract length. I think that's another thing on these signings.
4 years, yeah.
And I think that's something we've done really well with a lot of our players as well, which historically we haven't done. But for me, the final piece to the puzzle in regards to, I think we were still, I think Sonny Carey coming in and offers maybe a slight more creative side, but I think Nibs brings that to a different level, and I think it's that mixture of physical, technical, he brings goals, he brings assists, and he's an exciting player. And I think for me, that was the final piece to the puzzle that Charlton needed. And I mean, I remember we were texting, and when it looked like the deal had fallen through, I was
quite gutted, weren't you?
Well, I mean, I was absolutely gutted, because I felt that was the final kind of icing on the cake to really round off the squad. And don't get me wrong, I think there's still areas we do need to work on. But you can't do it all in one season. I think for this season, that was such an integral part of what we needed.
He looks like a strong boy, so he looks like, again, he's another one that will be able to, muscle his way through, create chances, and he scores from range. He can score clinically as well, sort of closer range. And like you said, he's another one of those style of players that we desperately need, and it gives us more depth as well. We've got a good few good attacking mid options now, which we did not have last year. He's proven to be a key part of that Reading side that played last season. I know they weren't at their best last year, but he was an outstanding player. All of their fans pretty gutted that they lost him.
Well, and I think once again, one of the things they've all said, which I think drops into a lot of the signings we've got, is the character of him as a person as well, and how well the fans kind of took to him. And I think that is such an important thing with Charlton, and something that, especially for Jones, I think those kind of players buy into what he wants. And I think the only way it works with Jones is if the players do buy in 100%. And I kind of get the feeling from most of the signings, probably away from his first half of the season at Charlton, where he had to rush through in January, I think most have been pretty successful signings, and are people who have bought into what he wants to do at the club.
Yeah, I think I saw his statement he put out to the Reading fans after he left, and you can tell he's got a bit of class about him. He's somebody that's clearly got his head screwed on. And like you said, they're the sort of players that Jones is earmarking left, right, and centre. You can see the players that are coming in, even down to the way they talk in their interviews and stuff. It's players that you can buy into, that are going to give their all for the club. And as Charlton fans, that's all we ask for really, is we have players that want to be there, work hard, have the ability to score goals, but if they're defensive, to clear the ball and all that stuff. So we're looking in a good shape, I would say. From those players we brought in, I'm more than happy with the business we've done so far. And it'll be interesting to see if there's any more. I know we've got a couple of trialists playing at the moment.
I think when I probably look at it, I think there is still parts of the squad that we do need to look at and we do need to improve on. I do still think, and I felt this last year, signing Apter, brilliant, that kind of attacking, kind of more kind of winger role. I think Tyrese Campbell, I still think we need some cover on that side. I think sometimes last season, I think it'll be a very interesting season for Tyrese Campbell. I think probably one of my negatives last year, I thought he really had that kind of kick on the season and did show a hell of a lot of promise, but I do think he went missing in some of the bigger games.
I think with him, his age, he's still learning, and I think you can, like you said, I think it showed in a few of those key games that we had towards the back end of last season. Our reliance on him to sort of dig us out of a hole, sometimes get us that goal out of nothing. When it wasn't happening for him, it was quite noticeable because we didn't have those other players necessarily who would step up and take that mantle. But I think now that we've got, like you say, the likes of Nibs, you got Carey, you got other players that we brought in that can score from nothing, which is what Campbell was doing at times. I think that's going to really help out and share the load of that pressure. I think you might even see Campbell actually flourish more now because he's got more players around him that can do that job.
Yeah, and I think probably when we looked at last year as well, I think because he was one of the only players a lot of the time who was creating, he was double marked. He was pushed out of games, and I think one of the things that did is probably create space for other players where it did work. But I think this year teams aren't necessarily going to be able to do that as much. If you have got your Nibs in the middle, you've got Apter out on the right, you've got Tyrese Campbell there, you've got a Laugh as well. I mean, when you look at everything all in, it's not necessarily going to be all on him anymore. And I think that's something we maybe relied on. And we did it with Small as well, realistically. But a lot of the time, there just was... We only had a few creative bets, and it was much...
But Jones will have earmarked that, and you can tell that's what he's done, because the types of players that he's brought in have probably been knowing that, you know, their areas of the pitch we've got to strengthen. And we have, and I think this season coming up is going to be an exciting one for Charlton fans because we can finally sort of push on. I think in years gone by, obviously we've been languishing in League One for a long time. It's been painful. Yeah, terrible. But being back in the Championship, the last thing we want to do is just nosedive and go back down because we're back to square one in a way. And I think there's a lot of optimism in the fan base as to sort of our chances of staying up have definitely massively increased with the types of players we brought in. I think that really has given everyone that sort of boost to know that we're not just going to be scrapping around at the bottom. Hopefully we'll be pushing that lower mid-table. We'll be more than happy with that, I'm sure. But who knows? Who knows where we'll go, you know?
Well, and I think I suppose this does go nicely into what would be your expectation going into next year. I think when we first got promoted, I was very much of the opinion if we're on goal difference, just survived kind of how relegation, how have we got there? I think one of the things that's taken me by surprise, and one thing I will say without doubt after all these years, is seeing the board back the team as much as they have. That's taken me by surprise. I think when I'm looking now at a kind of spend of around 11 to 12 million without
unheard of.
And without selling any players to fund that. I mean, a lot of teams who have 15, 20 mil, I think we're probably one of the highest net spends, I think, in the league. And I think to see that investment go in is something pretty unheard of. And when you think we were not long ago in the kind of eras where we were going 2 free transfer windows of only signing free transfers. And I think even when Bowyer went up to the kind of Championship last time, the realistic side is he had to very much work with a lot of what he had and lost some of what he had as well. And I think this time actually they've shown a real kind of commitment to saying, look, we're getting promoted, we're going up, and we want to stay here. And I think for what I expect this season is, I would hope with the signings we've now got that maybe I'd sit more towards a more comfortable staying up. And
I think that's the hope.
Yeah, and I think that's not for me. It's not thinking we're going to finish mid-table, top-end mid-table. I think for me, I see us more at that kind of, let's say, 16th, 17th, 18th, where we're comfortable enough away from relegation. Hopefully we haven't got to worry in the line on a 6-7 games. But I think it is going to take maybe a 2 or 3 year period of consolidating in the Championship before our next ambitions that hopefully the club do have of moving slowly up the table. But I think it will be, hopefully, I think looking at the signings, my view is we will have more of a comfortable season and hopefully kind of staying away from that relegation zone than I thought when we first got promoted. Because I thought when we first got promoted, I didn't see the board spending 11, 12 million to strong position.
I don't think any of us did, to be fair. And like you said, we've not been used to owners coming in and sort of either sticking to their words or, you know, investing in the club. And to be honest, like you can tell, just from the caliber of players we're bringing in, the money they're spending. Like to see a Charlton spend £1 million. I mean, we had a Habmay came in, I'm pretty sure, for around $1 million.
It was around, I think it was around, yeah. Well,
and at that
rumored
time, you know, that was like a sort of glimmer of hope that actually, yeah, the owners are going to start investing. But now to see we've gone up a level and the level of signing has gone up, but not only that, we're spending money and we're bringing in players that are quality, and those sort of players that in the past were being poached from us. And being a League One club with decent, you know, players in our squads, good academy players, we were also getting poached.
Well, on the academy side as well, for the first time in a long time, signing academy players to longer term contracts, and hopefully gone are the days where we're going to give our young talent that realistically it's so important to the club. And I think a way that probably the owners look at us being that next step of moving is when the next Conser comes through, when the next Lookman comes through, we get the transfer fee for that we deserve, and we don't let them go on a free transfer because we've just let all these contracts run down. And I think that's a really important thing. It seems like we're actually being run as a proper club now, and I mean that's the first time we can say that in I mean years and years and years. We've had glimpses of it, but never really seen action of it.
It's refreshing, and I think that's where that optimism comes in. You're going to see it this season, where the crowd levels are going to go up and up. I think you've got teams like Leicester, Southampton, you know, Sheffield United. So you've got the teams that are going to be up at the top of the table coming to the Valley. They're going to pretty much every week will be sold out in the away end. That's going to create better atmospheres. The just that feel good factor around the club is going to be really, really like refreshing. It was coming in to the back end of last season. I mean, that semi-final in the playoffs, that felt like
special.
Like you could tell there was that moment where, okay, you know, the club is definitely getting back to where it needs to be. And to be fair to our owners, to whoever's running the club, they are putting the building blocks in place. You can see it's even down to those little things like, you know, the flames coming up, you know, all that stuff. It was theatre, and that's the way football's going, whether you like it or not. It is going down that road. So if we can get that sort of atmosphere building every game, maybe not all the flames every week, but
it definitely beats the Sandguard going around the pitch with a guitar. So.
Yeah, but I mean, you can see where we're going. Like we've got those blocks, and being the club we are, Charlton got a rich history. We've been in the Prem before. People know we've got that sort of structure to be a big club. It's just having the owners there; they're going to back us, and it looks like we're going down that road. So I hope that's the way we're.
And I think that is the next steps, is consolidating into the Championship, and then who knows from there as to. I mean, when you look at the backing we've been given in just this kind of window, hopefully they are owners themselves who are looking with those kind of views going forward. And
if you're going to spend 10, 11 million on players, then you've got to be fairly serious about where you want that club to end up, because ultimately the whole goal is for them to get promoted to the Premier League. Now that's not necessarily going to happen overnight, and we know the Championship is going to be a ruthless league, and that's why everyone was just at the beginning of the season hoping, we'll stay up however we can. I think realistically now we're looking at maybe, like you said, being a bit more comfortable in staying up, and we'd take that lower mid-table finish would be perfect for us this season.
As I say, if we can go into, I thought it could be one of those where we're going into the last 3 or 4 games and it is kind of flip of a coin, and I think it was going to be a really competitive, and I think there's unfortunate side of some of the bits in the division in regards to the situation at Sheffield Wednesday. I think there's a situation at other clubs, and I think actually when I look at it now, I think we with that investment, as I say, my hope, and I think for me, next season has all got to just be about staying up, and I still feel the same in regards.
That's the be all and end all. Ultimately, if we hit that point total where we know we're safe, we'll be over the moon.
And I think that's got to be the main goal, and then hopefully off the back of that. But I think what we've done is we've given ourselves a really good platform of a squad that, if we can achieve that, which I feel very confident we can with what we've got there, I think we've then got the building blocks to then next year. We're not building a Championship squad, we're adding to a Championship squad. We're adding maybe, as say, certain players that realistically start to build us towards being that more competitive in the league and pushing up. And I think seeing it in that more realistic way is actually really, really good. And I think doing it in the more healthy approach of doing it slowly and doing it over that time, I think will work for us in the long run.
But we've got a manager in Nathan Jones who has been there before, so he's worked at that level. he's also one of those sort of managers that will get results, no matter how not everyone likes the style. Sometimes, we can sometimes be a little bit more defensive, but we're going to have to be against some of these bigger clubs. You've got the likes of, like I mentioned, Leicester, Southampton. They're going to be teams that are going to be have that sort of level above type of player. They're not really the games that we need to be too worried about. I think it's the mid-table teams, the lower down teams. They're the ones who are bread and butter. Will need to get some results.
And I fully expect this season there'll be a few games where we get spanked and we take a beating, and realistically it's going to happen, and you just have to accept it when it does. But I think also probably one of my kind of final points towards it is, I think Nathan Jones has also got what he needs this year, which is, I think last year he had positivity, but we needed to get to that next step. We needed to see results on the pitch. This season, he has got absolute unanimous support of every single Charlton fan. There is no one, I think, who's sitting there looking and going, oh my God, because I think he's done something a lot quicker than what we thought. And I think he will thrive in that environment. My big belief on why Stoke didn't work, why Southampton didn't work, in my opinion, is I think he is the kind of manager who has to be at the right club, and he has to have that time for people to buy in. And as I say, there was a point where I was questioning him, but the realistic side is once he gets all those fans on board, and once he gets that environment he thrives in, hopefully, who knows?
Yeah.
You see again what he did at Luton, and clearly for him to have done something like that in the past, he's mental.
Yeah,
he's absolutely mental sometimes, and you do look at him and think, Christ.
Yeah.
But I think once he is on board and once he starts clicking and he gets everything the way he wants, I think he can create something special. And
yeah, but also he's mental, but he's Charlton mental, isn't he? And that's what we love. We like to see that passion.
There's no manager, when you look at Nigel Atkins, or you look at, I remember Appleton when I was looking at Appleton, you look at them and I mean Appleton, for a prime example, I remember when he used to come to the post-match interview, and it would just be the same thing, but just no passion, no anything. And I think it's something Nathan Jones, love him or hate him, which I think you love him when he's at your club and hate him when he's not. But realistically, he brings that kind of special spark, which, as you say, is what Charlton.
Yeah, and to be fair, in football, momentum is massive, and I think we've already got that momentum from the last season, from obviously getting promoted, and it's how we push on with that momentum into the next season, and that's where it's going to be really interesting to see whereabouts we end up in the league. And actually, those first few games are going to be a barometer. I mean, Watford's an interesting opener, to be fair.
I think it's very interesting because I think with them, and I think we're going to go on to it in another episode where we will be able to kind of preview before the game, and I think the realistic side, when it comes to that first game, I think there will also be a side next season, which is we might have to see 10 games before we start seeing the real Charlton. We have had a lot of signings. It's going to take time to gel, and I think some of the more important players in the squad, like your Kelman, like your Nibs, they are going to take a bit of time. And I think you might see, I mean, we've got some tough games in those first 10. I mean, there's games there where we definitely can see points, but
we've got Leicester, I think, in the first.
Yeah,
I think
so. I look at it and think, look, it might not be an instant where we see first 10 games and we're sitting mid-table. We might be down in that relegation space at that. What I'm confident in is once it does start to click, and we saw it in last season.
Yeah, it happened last year.
That's where I feel confident. I think it will take time, but I feel very confident towards it.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely, like I say, after all the signings that have come in, I think if we had have just not really pushed on in signing players that we needed to, then you'd be looking at that sort of scrap down the bottom. Hopefully with those players we brought in, we're going to be above where we hoped before those signings happened. So yeah, let's see what this new season brings.
Yeah, what it brings.
It's always a roller coaster, and as Charlton fans, we all know.
That's definite. So, but well, thank you very much for watching the first episode. Next up, we're gonna hopefully get a video out before Saturday, which will give us our predictions for the full kind of Championship 24 table, and also looking at a preview going into the first game of the season against Watford. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.